Hello, and welcome to the Spicy Pod Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight we journey into a snowbound castle where the winter bride meets a frostbound prince in a world of icy halls, enchanted hearths, and centuries of magic. Her warmth melts his ancient solitude, sparking a slow burning desire that chills and thrills all at once. Winter has never been this passionate, where frost and fire collide and forbidden touches awaken hearts frozen for lifetimes. Snow had fallen through the night, layering the little mountain village in a soft, muted hush. Every rooftop shimmered beneath the pale morning light. Every window glowed with the warm gold of lanterns, and every footstep left a quiet print that the wind hurried to erase. Winter here was not merely a season, it was a presence, a force with a heartbeat and memory, a whisper of magic that pulsed through the valley. For as long as anyone could remember, the mountain had been ruled by the Frostbound Prince, the immortal guardian tied to the cycle of the seasons. Each year, the village sent a winter bride chosen by lottery to serve as a symbolic keeper of the season's balance. She would spend the winter months within his icy domain, ensuring harmony between the people and the ancient magic that held the snow in place. Most considered it an honor. Others, a superstition kept alive by fear of what might happen if the tradition ever broke. Alara had never expected her name to be called. Her life had been simple. Days spent helping in her family's workshop, evenings warmed by the scent of pine resin and the crackling fireplace. She had never pictured herself in ceremonial robes, nor imagined walking the steps of the frost-crowned castle carved into the mountainside. When the village gathered in the main square that morning, she'd stood in the back, wrapped tightly in her wool coat, expecting to go home as she always did, unselected, untouched by destiny. But destiny had a way of reaching even the ones who avoided its gaze. The elder dipped his hand into the carved wooden box, swirling the slips of parchment like fallen leaves caught in a gust. The crowd held its breath. Children clung to their parents' coats. The snow continued its delicate descent, gentle and indifferent. Then the slip was drawn. The elder's voice echoed across the square. Her name. Shock clamped around her chest. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, surprise, curiosity, and something like sympathy. Her heart fluttered violently, as if trying to escape through her ribs. Ilara felt heat rise to her cheeks, impossibly warm against the winter air. The world blurred around her. Only the elder's solemn expression remained clear. "You have been chosen," he said gently. "Tonight, you will journey to the winter keep." Ilara bowed her head, though her mind spun like a snowstorm. She had always known the tradition, yet the idea of entering the Frostbound Prince's realm made her pulse thrum with both fear and a strange, unexpected pull. Stories whispered that the prince was made of frost and shadow, a being forged from moonlight on ice, with eyes that held the cold of centuries. Few had seen him. Fewer still could speak of it without their voice softening, as if remembering something too powerful to name. She spent the afternoon preparing. Her family helped pack warm clothing, talismans for protection, and small charms meant to bring good fortune, though none could say if any of them truly mattered in the presence of old mountain magic. Her mother hugged her fiercely, hands trembling against her back. Her father whispered, "Be brave and be gentle, for even winter has a heart." As dusk gathered, the sky deepened to a shade of blue, so rich it felt like velvet. Lanterns were lit, flickering with amber light as the villagers formed a procession. Alara walked at the front, guided by the elder and the rhythmic crunch of snow underfoot. Cold wind kissed her cheeks, turning her breath to mist. The path led upward toward the towering silhouette carved from the mountainside, the Winter Prince's keep. Its spires shimmered with frost, glowing faintly like starlight caught in crystal. The closer she came, the more the air changed. It grew colder, sharper, charged with something ancient and alive. At the gate, the villager stopped. Only she could continue. Her heart pounded as she stepped beneath the archway of ice. For a moment, she hesitated, glancing back at the faces illuminated by warm lanterns. Then she inhaled deeply and crossed the threshold. The gate closed silently behind her. The courtyard beyond was a world of stillness and silver light. Frost laced every stone, every branch of the bare winter trees, and at the far end, half hidden in drifting snow, stood a tall figure, unmoving, watching her. Her breath caught, eyes like shards of winter sky, hair pale as moonlit frost, a presence that felt both distant and startlingly aware of her. The Frostbound Prince. Her pulse quickened, not only from fear, but from something warmer, deeper, something she could not yet name. Winter itself had turned to look at her, and the season shifted. Alara felt the cold long before she reached him. It wasn't an ordinary chill, not the kind born from winter winds or drifting snow. This was something older, an ancient cold that breathed through the stones themselves, humming softly beneath her feet. It wrapped around her like a curious spirit, not cruel, but cautious, as if testing the warmth she carried. The figure at the far end of the courtyard waited with a stillness that felt carved from moonlit ice. He didn't move as she approached, yet the air around him seemed to shift as if acknowledging her presence. When she came close enough to see him clearly, her breath caught in her throat. Kalen. She knew his name only from whispered stories, but none had prepared her for the reality of him. His eyes were a piercing, crystalline blue, beautiful, cold, and impossibly ancient. His hair fell like frost-kissed silver threads over his shoulders. His coat, woven from enchanted winter fur, shimmered faintly as if dusted with fresh snow. He looked every bit a prince shaped by storms and silence, and yet something in the set of his mouth suggested he was studying her just as intently. "Elara," he said, voice smooth with the faintest echo of winter wind curling inside each syllable, the one chosen by the mountain. Her heart fluttered. "Yes, Your Highness." He tilted his head slightly, regarding her with a gaze that felt far too penetrating. "Titles are unnecessary here. The mountain accepted you, and so do I." He stepped closer, and the cold deepened for a moment, sharp as frost forming on glass, before softening, melting, as if thawing in her presence. "I'm Kalen, up close." His presence was overwhelming. He was tall, elegantly built, and his nearness made the air swirl with shimmering particles that reminded her of ice crystals drifting through moonlight. She wasn't sure if she shivered from cold or from something else entirely. Something warm, fluttering, and undeniably aware of him. "I've long wondered," Kalen murmured, almost to himself, "what kind of warmth the mountain would send me." Alara's cheeks heated despite the freezing air. He spoke as if winter itself had brought her here, as if she were not a girl from a village but a flame gifted to an age-old guardian. She swallowed softly. "I hope I can fulfill the role." His gaze lowered briefly to her hands where she clutched her shawl. When his eyes returned to hers, they glimmered with something that wasn't quite amusement, wasn't quite warmth, but held the promise of both. "You will," he said simply. He extended his hand. The gesture was regal, but there was something intimate hidden beneath it, a quiet invitation. Elara hesitated only for a breath before placing her hand in his. Cold, pure, shocking cold, like dipping her fingers into fresh snow. But then, slowly, impossibly, his chill softened, his touch warmed under hers, frost melting just where their skin met. Kalen exhaled, and that alone made her pulse skip. The cold melts only for her. The old stories suddenly didn't feel like stories at all. "This way," he said, yet quietly, releasing her hand with a reluctance she almost imagined. "There is much to show you." He led her through the courtyard, the enchanted lanterns flickering to life as they passed, lighting the path in soft silver blue. Frosted trees rose around them, branches glittering like crystal chandeliers. The silence was deep but not empty. It thrummed with magic, with ancient memory. Inside the keep, the walls glowed with veins of frozen light. Alara's breath fogged faintly as she looked around in awe. Kylan watched her, more than he watched the path. "You're not afraid," he observed. She blinked, surprised. "Should I be?" His lips curved into the barest hint of a smile, so faint she wondered if she imagined it. "Most who stand before me can barely speak. I can barely think," she admitted quietly. His steps faltered. When he turned to her, there was something softer in his eyes, an emotion buried under centuries of frost, surfacing only in shards. He didn't speak it, but she felt it anyway. They stopped before a towering door carved from living ice. Kalen brushed his fingers over its surface. The ice responded, glowing faintly, shifting open without a sound. Beyond it lay a grand hall, shimmering with frozen arches and drifting snowlight. "This," he said, "is the heart of winter, and as its chosen guardian, you now walk it with me." The word sent a warm pulse through her, spreading down her spine. "Why me?" she whispered. Kalen stepped closer, so close the cold radiating from him surrounded her. Not harsh, but enveloping, like a winter cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. "Because," he said softly, voice almost a whisper of frost and longing, "you are the first warmth this place has felt in a very long time." Her breath stilled. Winter's prince looked at her as though she were a spark in a world of ice. The hall shimmered with a cold, otherworldly beauty, light drifting like falling snow, frost spiraling into delicate patterns along the walls, shadows gliding like quiet spirits across the floor. Ilara felt as though she'd stepped into the heart of winter's dream. Kalen walked beside her with silent steps, his presence a living paradox. A cold so ancient it felt carved from the mountains, yet a warmth blooming slowly wherever she stood too close to him. She could almost sense the magic of the keep watching her, measuring her, trying to understand this new warmth crossing its thresholds. "The court has been silent for centuries," Kalen said, stopping before a series of tall, arching windows carved from translucent ice. "Once winter was ruled by many, spirits of frost, snow, glacial winds, but now only I remain to hold the balance." His voice echoed gently, like wind brushing frozen peaks. Ilara stepped closer to the windows. Beyond them, the mountains stretched endlessly, wrapped in drifting white mist. "You're alone," she whispered. Kalen did not immediately answer. For a moment he simply stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, gaze fixed on the horizon where the first stars glimmered like shards of ice. "Winter requires solitude," he said at last. "But solitude does not make it easy." His tone held something fragile, something she never would have expected from a being made of frost and silence. Her breath softened, and she dared to look at him fully. Up close, his face was almost painfully beautiful, sharp lines softened by a kind of cold radiance. eyes that held an entire season inside them, and beneath the surface, she sensed a longing he had never allowed himself to name. Alara, Kaelin said, turning toward her, the air around him shimmering faintly. There is something I must show you. He led her deeper into the hall, where an enormous throne stood at its center. It was carved from a single block of ice, smooth as glass, intricately etched with patterns that glowed faintly like constellations beneath the surface. Snow swirled around it in slow, gentle eddies. This is the winter throne, Kaelin said. Its magic binds the season to the land. As long as I sit upon it, the mountains are held in balance. He lifted a pale hand, and the throne brightened in response. Recognizing him, Alara felt the air grow colder, the shimmer intensifying until frost dusted the floor around them. She shivered, wrapping her cloak tighter. Kaelin noticed, without thinking. Perhaps without meaning to, he stepped closer. The cold surrounding him ebbed, melting away as though retreating from her warmth. It was the second time it had happened, and this time, Kaelin didn't hide his reaction. His eyes widened, his breath caught, not visibly, but she felt it in the air, like the moment before snow begins to fall. "You affect the throne," he murmured, almost in disbelief. "Its frost lessens near you." She swallowed. Is that a good thing?" "It is impossible," he said, but there was a spark in his voice, an ember beneath the winter chill. "And yet it is happening." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hall hummed with soft, crystalline magic. Kaelin lifted his hand slowly, so slowly she could have stepped back but didn't. The back of his fingers brushed the edge of her cheek. Frost, a whisper of ice, then warmth blooming under her skin. Her breath trembled. "Alara," he said quietly, voice lowering into something far more intimate than she expected. "Your presence shifts the heart of winter itself." He didn't pull away. If anything, he drew a fraction closer. His nearness fogged the air between them, his cold breath mixing with her warm one, a soft mist drifting upward like the breath of a candle about to flicker. "How?" she whispered. "I do not know," he admitted, "but the keep responds to you, and so do I." Her pulse thrummed, the cold at her back pressed gently against her spine, while Kaelin's warmth, his impossible warmth, gathered in the small space between them. Before she could answer, the snow light above them shifted, pulsing softly, the keep itself reacting to the surge of magic, to the quiet heat blooming in the center of winter's throne room. The moment stretched, fragile, charged, suspended, like a single snowflake caught in still air. Kaelin lowered his hand at last, though his gaze didn't leave hers. "There is more for you to see, and more that I must understand." He stepped back, not too far, just enough to catch his breath. But not tonight. You have traveled far. You should rest. Rest. Yes. Except she already knew sleep would not come easily. Not after feeling winter melt beneath her touch. He gestured toward a corridor illuminated with pale blue light. Your chambers await. As she turned to leave, Kaelin spoke once more, quietly. Elara, the mountain chose you for a reason, and I intend to discover why. She felt his gaze on her until she vanished into the corridor, warmth blooming in her chest despite the icy walls. Winter was watching her, and winter had begun to thaw. Elara expected the winter bride's chambers to be cold, bleak, carved from ice like the rest of Kaelin's keep. Instead, when she stepped inside, the room glowed with gentle warmth. Warmth that surprised her after everything she'd seen. A soft fire danced in the hearth, its flames a deep blue instead of orange, casting shadows like drifting petals of night. She walked deeper inside, her steps sinking into furs so plush they made no sound at all. Frost traced the walls in elegant curling patterns, but they shimmered softly, as if lit from within. At the center of the room stood a bed, carved from pale wood, covered in thick blankets woven with threads of winter magic. Elara exhaled slowly. This can't be for me. Behind her, Kaelin spoke, his voice blending so seamlessly with the hush of the corridor that she hadn't heard him approach. It is. She turned. He stood framed in the doorway, pale hair falling around his face like threads of silver moonlight. His presence filled the room, the air shifting subtly colder. And yet she felt heat, her heat, stirring around her like a protective cloak. This chamber was created for the winter bride generations ago, Kaelin murmured, but it has never been used. Her brows lifted. Never? He shook his head. Winter brides existed only in ritual, symbolic guardians. None stayed here, none lived beside me. His gaze flickered over her shoulder toward the low burning hearth. It's burning, he said very softly. Elara looked at the fire. Yes. It never did before, Kaelin whispered. His voice held a note she'd never heard from him. Something close to wonder and something closer still to fear. Elara approached the hearth, kneeling before it. The blue flames licked the air gently, crackling with a sound like distant snow. She held out her hand. Instead of burns, she felt warmth, soft, gentle, like sunlight filtered through winter clouds. Why does it burn now? She asked. Kaelin stepped inside the room. The door closed behind him without a sound, frost curling along the wood. Because its flames awaken only for warmth it trusts. He paused. Only for warmth that calls to mine. Her heart stuttered. She rose slowly, turning toward him. Kalen stood a few steps away, his expression unreadable, a mix of control and something unraveling beneath it. You should know, he said, his voice low, that winter does not respond to mortals easily. It resists them. It rejects them. His eyes searched hers, unsettlingly intense. Yet it bends around you. Ilara swallowed. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I, Kalen admitted, and the honesty hit her like a warm gust in the cold. He stepped closer, only a single step, but the shift in the air was unmistakable. Frost retreated from her warmth. The flames in the hearth flickered brighter. Her heartbeat echoed in her throat. Kalen hesitated. Even being near her pulled threads of winter loose from the walls. I came to ensure you were comfortable, he said quietly, but his voice wavered on the last word, betraying him. Ilara glanced around the room. It's beautiful, warmer than I expected. It shouldn't be, Kalen whispered. The fire, the walls, even the air. His breath fogged, but around her it melted instantly. This room is reacting to you. Another step, close enough for her to feel the cold rolling off him, close enough that her warmth brushed against his chest like a breath. He froze, not physically, but as if fighting an instinct. Ilara. His voice sank lower, almost a warning to himself. If I stand closer, more will react. She should have stepped back. She didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Let it." His composure splintered just slightly, a crack in the frost. He lifted a hand, slowly, painfully slow, and brushed a stray curl from her cheek. His touch was cold at first, shocking, then melting, warming, softening until it felt like a caress made of winter turning to spring. The hearth flared. Blue flames roared gently, filling the room with soft, glowing heat. Kalen's eyes widened. Ilara. She leaned into his touch, breath trembling. You're warm. No, he murmured. You are. And winter follows. For a moment, neither moved. The air was thick with a kind of magic that didn't belong in rituals or legends. It belonged in heartbeats, in proximity, in this impossible nearness. Kalen lowered his hand, visibly struggling for control. You should rest, he said, though his voice was hushed, shaken. Tomorrow, you will see the mountain paths. He took a slow breath, and I will try not to unsettle the keep again. Ilara's pulse fluttered. Why does it react like this? Kalen stood at the door, his eyes lingering on her with a softness that turned her knees weak. Because winter has noticed you, he said, and it has never noticed anyone. The door closed gently behind him, leaving her alone with the blue fire and the echo of warmth on her cheek, still melting frost. Morning in the winter keep was nothing like morning in Alara's village. Here, dawn did not break with sunlight. It drifted in with silver mist, rolling gently through the corridors like a living breath. Frosted glass panes glowed with pale blue light, and the air shimmered with particles of snow that never melted. It was beautiful, eerie, and impossibly quiet. Ilara pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders as she stepped out of her chamber. The blue fire was still burning behind her, a soft crackle echoing in the room. It made her pause. The flames hadn't dimmed once. They were waiting for her warmth. She tried not to think about the way Kaylin's touch had felt, cold at first, then melting beneath her skin, a soft surrender, but the memory lingered like heat trapped under the furs. Ilara. She turned. Kaylin stood several paces away, framed in drifting snowlight. His long coat hung open, revealing the faint frost shimmering across his chest, as though winter itself addressed him. His silver hair fell over his shoulders in loose, moonlit strands. And yet, there was something different about him this morning, something unsettled, something warmer around the edges. "You slept?" he asked. "I did," she said softly. "The room was warm." His jaw tightened a fraction. "Yes, I could feel it." She blinked. "You could feel it?" Kaylin stepped closer, the air shifting with him. Frost spiraled around his boots, then melted in the brief space between them, melted because of her. He exhaled, a slow, controlled breath. "The hearth responded to your presence. Its magic is woven into the keep. When it awakened," his gaze dropped to her lips for the briefest heartbeat, so quick she almost doubted it. "I felt it from my chamber." Her pulse jumped. "Oh, yes." His eyes flickered away, as though admitting it cost him something. "We should walk. The mountain paths wait." He offered his hand. Last night she had taken it without hesitation. This morning, she felt the weight of what that touch meant. Still, she placed her hand in his, cold, then warmth blooming, just for her. The keep's frost sighed around them as they walked into the open air. Outside, the mountain was breathtaking. Snow spread in shimmering sheets across the peaks, each flake glowing faintly with winter magic. Wind curled down the slopes in soft, melodic currents, carrying scents of pine and distant storms. The path beneath their feet was carved into the mountainside itself, winding gently upward. And Kaylin did not walk like a man. He walked like the season he embodied, steady, silent, beautiful in a way that felt both dangerous and calming. As they advanced along the path, Ilara felt the cold deepen, sharper with each step. It should have stung, but Kalen's presence beside her softened it, easing the bite. The paths were formed centuries ago, he said, his voice low, guiding, carved by spirits of frost. They bind the winter magic to the land. If they falter, storms break free. Has that ever happened? Yes, once. His tone darkened, and it cost the mountain dearly. She hesitated. Was that when the rest of the court disappeared? Kalen stopped walking. The wind held its breath. Yes, he said finally. Winter collapsed inward. The balance shifted. I remained to hold what was left. She watched him quietly. You have been alone a long time. His fingers twitched beside hers, as though resisting the urge to reach for her again. Solitude is what the season demands, he said, but he paused. I did not expect solitude to end. Ilara's heart softened. She stepped close, closer than she dared before, and Winter reacted instantly. The snow at her feet melted at the edges. Kalen's chest drew in a sharp breath, the frost across his coat glimmering like startled stars. Is that uncomfortable? She asked. His gaze dropped to their small, melted circle in the snow. It is unfamiliar, but not bad. His eyes lifted to hers, and something flickered there, something raw. No, he murmured, not bad. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them fogged with shared breath, the mountain humming beneath their feet. Then Ilara noticed something strange, a shadow stretching along the path beside Kalen, not his own, not shaped like a man. It curled behind him like smoke made of frost. Kalen, she whispered, what is that? He stiffened. That is my shadow, the part of me that anchors the season. It is not always still. The frost shadow pulsed once, like a heartbeat made of ice. Does it feel? Ilara asked. Kalen looked away. Yes. A pause. And it reacts to warmth even more strongly than I do. The shadow shifted toward her, stretching an inch across the snow. Kalen stepped between them instantly, hand lifting in a silent command. The shadow retreated like a chastened wolf. Forgive it, he said softly. It has never encountered someone it cannot freeze. Ilara's breath shivered, and I'm not someone it can freeze. Someone, he repeated, eyes darkening. No, you are warmth. To winter that is far more dangerous. Her pulse hammered. Kalen's voice dropped lower, rougher, as though resisting the way the mountain leaned toward her warmth. And it seems winter has already begun to want you. Snow drifted softly against the tall windows of Kalen's private chamber, muffling the world in a quiet so complete it felt enchanted. The storm had gentled at last, leaving only the hush of winter surrounding the castle. Inside, however, warmth flickered, thin at first, then growing, drawn from the closeness between them. Ilara stood near the hearth, fingers lightly brushing the carved mantel. The fire burned higher when Kalen approached, responding to something deep and wordless between them. "You steady the season," he murmured, stopping just behind her. His breath ghosted against the back of her neck. "And you steady me." Her pulse fluttered. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. His eyes, usually cold like glacial ice, held something melting inside them tonight, something fragile, something hungry. "Ilara," he said, voice low. "May I?" She didn't know what he intended, but she nodded, his hand lifted, hesitant, trembling faintly, frost lingering along his fingertips. He touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers first, careful, reverent. The chill was sharp for only a heartbeat before it softened into warmth, a warmth he seemed surprised by. "Your heat," Kalen whispered, "should not reach me like this." "But it does," she said, "every time you touch me." His breath caught. He stepped closer until their bodies were nearly touching, but he kept his hands light, one at her cheek, the other grazing her waist, as if afraid she would disappear. When she lifted her hand and placed it against his chest, he shuddered, truly shuddered. Her warmth seeped through his shirt, and frost dissolved beneath her palm like morning frost under sunlight. "Ilara." His voice was rough, unraveling. "You thaw me." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, then the curve of his throat, mapping the contrast of cold and heat blooming beneath her touch. He didn't move away. If anything, he leaned into her, as though starving for contact after centuries of isolation. Their foreheads touched, their breaths mingled, cold and warm twisting together, and then he kissed her, slow, deep, icy at first, then melting, melting. The hearth roared to life in a flare of gold as their lips met, casting firelight across their bodies and filling the room with gentle heat. Kalen pulled her closer, his hands finally abandoning restraint. Frost formed faintly along her sleeves where his fingers pressed, only to dissolve as her warmth seeped into him. He kissed her again, softer this time, then again, lingering, like he was learning how. "Ilara," he whispered against her lips. "I haven't felt anything like this in lifetimes." "Then feel it," she whispered. "Stay with me tonight." The word struck him like a spell. His eyes widened, hope and fear clashing across his features, but he nodded. Gently, reverently, he guided her toward the bed. They lay close, not tangled, not hurried, just pressed together in a way that felt intimate in its own tenderness. His arm wrapped around her waist, her head rested against his chest, and their breaths steadied in a shared rhythm. The warmth between them grew, soft and living. As she touched the back of his hand, she felt the frost retreat completely, leaving only cool skin warmed by her presence. Kaelin exhaled, a sound both relieved and undone. "Your warmth," he murmured. "It keeps me alive in ways I do not know how to name." Ilara slid her fingers between his, intertwining them, feeling the cold threads of his magic give way to something gentler. "And you keep me safe in ways I've never known," she whispered. He drew her closer, burying his face in her hair. He didn't sleep. He rarely did. But he rested, fully, peacefully, for the first time in centuries. And Ilara, warmed by magic and heartbeat alike, felt something shift deep inside her chest. Fear, desire, trust, all threading together, melting the first true layer of frost between them. By the time dawn crept pale across the mountains, the hearth still burned, steady and strong, echoing the connection forged through the night. They were no longer just winter prince and winter bride. They were something new, something fragile, something warming, something thawing. The morning light glinted off snow-draped peaks, spilling pale silver into the castle's great hall. Ilara stirred, cocooned in the warmth of furs and the lingering heat of the hearth, her hand still resting atop Kaelin's chest. He was awake, eyes tracing hers with a softness that made her chest ache. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning," he replied, voice low, intimate, unguarded. His hand brushed a strand of hair from her face, fingertips faintly frosted at first, then warmed by her presence. The chill lingered no longer. It had surrendered to her warmth, melted entirely in her touch. Outside, the villagers were beginning their morning rituals, but inside the keep, time moved differently. The snow drifted silently, enchanted and patient, as if respecting the space between them. Kaelin leaned closer, the heat of his body mingling with hers, bridging centuries of solitude. "Winter has not felt like this before," he murmured. It listens now, to us." Ilara smiled softly. "To us?" He nodded. "Yes, the hearth burns because we are together. The season itself responds to what we bring. You have changed it, and me." Her heart fluttered at the weight of his words. She had expected a ceremonial role, a symbolic presence to honor the mountain's magic. But this was far more intimate, far more real. She had become his anchor, and in turn he had become hers. Kaelin's hand traced the curve of her shoulder, then down her arm, brushing against the warmth she carried like a living thing. Frost formed faintly at the edges of his fingers before dissolving under her touch, a delicate reminder of the magic he embodied, softened by her presence. "I've never known warmth like yours," he admitted, voice husky, revealing a vulnerability that had no place in centuries of frost. "It's everything." Ilara reached up, resting her hands against his chest, feeling the pulse beneath his skin, the unnatural rhythm of an immortal being who had learned to exist alone. "And I've never known cold like yours," she said softly, "but I can live with it if it's yours." He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that fogged the room. Cold and warmth tangled, melted, and intertwined. Frost and flame coexisting in delicate balance. It lingered, hesitant yet sure, a whispered promise in the quiet of the keep. The hearth flared in response, gold and blue flames dancing together, reflecting the new equilibrium forged between them. The magic of the season had never been so alive, so attentive, so tender. Ilara could feel it in her bones, in the beat of her heart, and in the soft weight of Kalen's arms around her. He pulled back just slightly, forehead resting against hers. "I thought I was bound to ice, to solitude, but you—" His words trailed into a breathless exhale. "You have shown me warmth, shown me life. And you've shown me a world I never imagined," she whispered. "One where winter isn't just cold and distant, but alive and protective and shared." For the first time, the castle felt like a home rather than a fortress of frost. The hall, the windows, even the snow-dusted peaks beyond seemed to shimmer in approval. Winter, long patient and indifferent, had taken notice and chosen to yield to warmth. Kalen smiled, faint but luminous, a rare break in his centuries-old composure. He brushed a soft kiss along her temple. "Then we embrace it," he said, "together." They stood, hands intertwined, and let the firelight bathe them, drawing the blue and gold hearth closer like a silent witness to their bond. Their breaths mingled, fogging the air, tiny clouds of warmth and frost dancing around them. Every shiver, every gentle caress, every lingering touch was a promise to protect, to cherish, to endure. Outside, the villagers would soon notice the first fire of the season, one that burned brighter than tradition dictated. It was not merely the hearth or the ceremony that glimmered. It was the culmination of trust, desire, and courage that had thawed ancient walls. Ilara tilted her head, brushing her lips against Kalen's. "Winter is alive," she murmured, "because of us." "And we are alive," he replied, voice reverent, "because of each other." The snow fell gently beyond the windows, soft, silent, beautiful. Inside, Frost and warmth coexisted, blending and balancing, mirroring the slow, certain rhythm of hearts that had finally found one another. Together, they stood in the quiet blaze of the hearth, the first fire of the season reflecting off their eyes, casting long shadows of intimacy and trust. The winter bride and the frost-bound prince, frozen and thawed, solitary and entwined, had found equilibrium at last. And in that glow, they knew this was only the beginning. Winter would endure, but it would never be lonely again. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.